Welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host, Cyrus, where we talk about complex supernatural subjects that you may not hear anywhere else. Tonight, I want to talk about the concept of densities because sometimes you hear me or others talking about that terminology, and sometimes it might not be clear exactly what we are referring to. We may say 3D or 4D, which could mean dimensions, but it could also mean density, and it could be interchangeable between those two things. And this relates to out-of-body experiences, after-death contact, near-death experiences, the whole smorgasbord of supernatural things that happen to people. But specifically, this terminology comes out of the book The Law of One, and the reason that I cite The Law of One is because among different allegedly channeled books in the metaphysical aisle, The Law of One, I think, does the best job of explaining a lot of these concepts, putting the pieces together. So this was an allegedly extraterrestrial channeled book that bridges the gaps between extraterrestrial subjects and spiritual subjects, including all of the topics we talk about, puts the pieces together in a way that usually makes pretty good sense. The book is almost incomprehensibly written because these ancient Egyptian slash extraterrestrial alleged intelligences that were being allegedly channeled. You must be getting tired of hearing the word alleged, aren't you? But I always want to put that in there just because how can we ever know for sure? But these entities would write or speak in a way which was, shall we say, very alien to the way that we talk. But if you can understand what they're talking about, there's a lot of good content in there that makes a lot of sense to me. Additionally, The Law of One has had a huge surge of popularity in the last couple of years, for the most part due to Gaia TV, the show Cosmic Disclosure, the work of David Wilcock, and the work of Corey Goode, the alleged insider with the deep state who claims to have been in contact with the alien race that wrote The Law of One. So because of that, because of the immense popularity of those guys, a lot of people went and bought The Law of One, which has resulted in a lot of people suddenly having like this adept level of knowledge about like the afterlife and topics like that, which I think is really cool. So suddenly there's all these people who like are clued in, they know what's going on, and I love that. So I'm going to explain the concept now of densities, how it relates to the afterlife, what I mean when I talk about densities. But before we begin, please hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. The best way to support this channel and the message is to hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit the share button if you think people can find this to be of use. If you don't like these topics, if it's outside of your boggle threshold, if you think that I've lost my marbles, then there's a lot of video blogs about cheese, as well as cars, and social politics that you can subscribe to on YouTube. I also watch PewDiePie if you're into memes. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you hate these topics, it probably makes sense to go someplace else instead of sending me angry messages on YouTube or angry messages to my email inbox telling me I'm full of crap, because it seems like a not necessary expense of a person's resources. But I'm just going to toss that out there. Densities. So density relates to the composition of a soul and the realm that they find themselves in. Now, all these densities also have many, many layers in between them. So as Jürgen the Z-Way talks about, there could be millions of different layers between different realms and dimensions that we find ourselves in. But generally speaking, on a broad level, we can sort of begin to classify the general elements of different realms and what to expect. So that's probably the number one mistake people make with this information, is they don't understand about all the sub-levels in between these places. So densities begin with the evolution of a consciousness from being just part of the galactic soup, not having any kind of individual identity, not being an individual expression, on to becoming Bob working at the pizza factory, kneading dough and coming home with a Budweiser and watching The Price is Right. What is the expanse between a primitive organism, Bob, and a higher celestial entity? So it begins with the first density, inanimate matter. So this is literally rocks. The out-of-body guy Ken Show I sometimes talk about claims he had a past life as a rock. I would possibly argue that maybe this was a very recent past life that he was a rock, and then he's very new at the human experience. No, I'm just teasing. I'm just picking on the guy. He's a friend of mine. But by the law of one cosmology, any inanimate object this quarter has some primitive energetic wavelength that could someday be manifested into like an individual organism. As weird or as difficult as that is to believe. This is the first density, so basically, I mean, it's just the element of source consciousness, just one of infinite offshoots that represents itself as physical matter, whether that's on this realm or on an astral physical world or wherever, just a piece of anything. Second density is vegetable and animal kingdoms, plant and animal kingdoms. So as bibliotecapelades.net explains it, lessons have to do with biological life, survival, adaptation, competition, and group organization as seen with animals and the like. The soul structure is generally a species of soul pool, so a group consciousness. But as species become more advanced, individual members of the species may differentiate themselves by more varied individual learning. So let's talk about like a tick that lives in the soil. So while ticks in particular have a very direct line of soul evolution from being like a blood-sucking creature that lives on people's backs into becoming a politician, before they become a politician, they exist on this second density level. And on this level, they have a very, very primitive form of soul consciousness, but they're basically connected to a group soul. So when you see a moth fluttering around and you accidentally step on it and you kill it, you don't have to feel too bad because it has very little individual evolved consciousness. It's part of a group soul. It's going to, that consciousness that was aware of that moth is going to just automatically become aware of a different moth or get born again. I mean, it's like, there are individual elements of each creature, but it's attached to the group soul consciousness, and it's learning like the very basic fundamental lessons about being an individually aware organism living in conjunction with other organisms. And so there's tons of second density things all around. And I would argue between second density and third density, like 2.5 densities, we start going to more evolved creatures like pet dogs, pet cats that are now gaining more individual awareness. So they're on the way to eventually incarnating in third density as like a human. Lessons of second density continue in more complex forms, as in battles for social domination and more survival. Individually acquired personality and individual learning play a greater role. Humans also share soul pools and group souls, but it's much less pronounced. So we don't exactly have full awareness of our group souls, but we still have them. The specific lesson is making a choice of orientation of service, so we can either be of service to other people, being like quality, good people and good members of society, or a service to ourselves, like being some of the people I see in Southeast Asia who come to indulge in the cheap prices and buy hookers and buy drugs and basically be a menace to the whole society. I sat next to a guy like that on the airplane here to Manila. The point being, there's some people who are on a path of service to themselves at the expense of everybody else, and then there's people who have a little bit of an awakening and they begin caring more about people around them. And then by law of one terms, this is like the main purpose even of our life here in this density, is just to learn to care a little bit more about other people and the community and the greater whole than being a bad person. So now we go into the afterlife spectrum, which is fourth density. And fourth density is described as a partly physical state where graduates of third density may deepen and perfect their chosen polarity. Service to self and other groups are distinct in fourth density and do not automatically come in contact unless the context of interacting with third density. So you can exist in fourth density and still be a selfish entity, and then you're going on a path, but it's basically like cosmic cancer. So you can become more and more service to self oriented until you basically just destroying anything around you to feed yourself. And these become the very like negative astral entities, like the shadow people or demonic entities, if you keep going down that path, or negative extraterrestrial entities. Or you can just be a good-natured, positive person who cares about other people, which I'd say is like most of us. And then you get to enjoy the pleasures and all the lovely elements of that on the astral plane that we talk about on this channel, while the darker entities keep diving downward into the lower astral spectrum and basically what religions call hell. So there was that split off. While civilization continues on the fourth density in physical worlds like this one that are a little bit less physical, so you can materialize things, you can teleport around, communicate telepathically, and it's the same density that most extraterrestrials also come from. Now there's also different levels, so there's 3.5 density, some say is like the middle astral plane that I talk about on this channel. So it's not quite complete fourth density, which is more like the higher astral plane where it's very thought responsive. So actually, the person who used the 3.5 density term was an insider named Randy Kramer, who claimed to be working for the secret echelons of the government, claimed to be in contact with extraterrestrials. He talked about a near-death experience that he had, and he claims, I guess, on these upper echelons, people use this terminology. People in the know about these topics, and they call things density levels. It's all just common knowledge among extraterrestrials and secret programs. So he said that when you die, you go to the 3.5 density, 3.5 density, not quite fourth density. So this is the astral plane that we talk about. Totally real, physical, solid place, but much more heightened than this world. And if you lead a good life here, that world is just incomparably better in many ways than this place. And then you can move up to like fourth density level. So he basically said in his near-death experience, he was invited to be taken into a 3.5 density level, but his guides, he had a communication. He was brought back to his body. This was after he was severely wounded. He claims after he allegedly had a deadly encounter with an extraterrestrial that probably blew a hole in his chest or something, and then the government program he was with had to piece him back together again. Next we have fifth density. Fifth density. So this is where we get things get very interesting, and I think it explains some of the hard to understand subjects in this field. When we talk about non-physical locations and some of these sort of out there reports that contradict other reports, souls of the first through fourth densities find themselves in fifth density between incarnations. This is a contemplation zone where these souls may observe their past future lives from a purely ethereal state of being. However, for progress to be realized, the souls must incarnate in the density which best corresponds to their level of progress. This is extremely important, in my opinion, because I've long said in this channel, when you're in the purely non-physical, ethereal state of existence, why do communications from spirits at that level say, hey, I miss hugging people and I miss being able to eat cheese and drink wine and have adventure and things like that? Because it's a contemplative state. You're now pure consciousness. You're not plugged into the matrix. You're not playing the game anymore. You're outside of that level, probably in communication with your soul group. And in my view, this is not a level that is in itself a goal. This is a holdover point between incarnations. Now, this is the next big key, and like so many topics, it all just corresponds to each other. Paramahansa Yogananda, in Autobiography of a Yogi, describes the density levels, and he makes it very clear that the fourth density, the astral worlds, are also an incarnation. So when we talk about reincarnation, we can just as likely talk about being incarnated on the fourth or astral density. So fifth density is separated from any of the densities below it, and it's a completely non-physical point of contemplation until you decide to incarnate again, which may involve having an astral body on the fourth density level. So when you hear mediums talking about, Uncle Bob is on the other side, but he says he exists as a wisp of smoke and he can't do any of the things that we used to do in this world, that doesn't mean that this is the whole afterlife. It means that medium is in contact with somebody who is on the fifth density and hasn't yet decided where they're going to go next. And so to me, this solves the mystery. This has long been an area of contention, and now to me it's understood. That's the fifth density. The sixth density corresponds to the level of the names of God, unified thought forms. Entities who no longer need to reincarnate or even have other incarnations, because they now have a bigger incarnation. So think about it this way. Your soul group, let's say it's 500 different incarnations, all of those merge together into one singular incarnation that has its own identity that is superior and consists of all the accumulated knowledge and is still an individual entity. Now coming in as this really superior entity that we would maybe refer to as a god, or in religious terms, like an angel. So you could even argue like these great masters, like let's say Jesus Christ, who appears in so many people's near-death experiences and can be in a million places at once, probably a sixth density entity. So they would seem to us like gods. They are the end result of many, many different incarnations. And what's really cool is that sixth density entities can come down to the third density and materialize among us if they want to, or the fourth density, and they will be these really sublime, extremely loving, extremely powerful, knowing entities that exist in this higher spectrum of consciousness. If you want to believe the testimony of Corey Good, which is a big if, but I kind of believe what he has to say, he claims he met one of the authors of the Law of One, named Ra Tir Er, who was originally an extraterrestrial that has an avian or blue bird-like appearance. And it's a sixth density entity that exists on this level, but can materialize onto this level, this dimension. And that it's like he shook its hand and said its skin was soft like powder. It was extremely telepathic. It knew every single thought in your whole history, your whole life, in a split second. It will know all of that about you. And operates very benevolently. And so he claims that this is the entity that wrote the Law of One and was regarded as the god Ra by the ancient Egyptians. I'll toss that one out there. I'm neither here nor there on that, but other people claim to be in contact with these entities too, so there is something to that. Seventh density, this is the level where all is one and one is all in a practical, real, and meaningful sense. There's no longer any difference between thought and reality. Corresponds to the notion of all-encompassing God or universe or the sun absolute, whatever that means. So this is the hyperdimension some people in advanced near-death experiences have. But if you notice, like whether it's out-of-body experiences or near-death experiences, they're only in that state of existence on like an excursion. They end up back on the level that they're meant to be at. So presumably the next level of evolution for sixth density is to be able to be in this hyperdimension state permanently. In my opinion, like frankly, not enough is known about this for it to be relevant, that relevant to my life. I'll think about this once I'm a sixth density super being, whatever that might look like. So that's the densities in a nutshell. To me, it solves mysteries, makes sense, helps us understand the astral dimensions, helps remove us from the astral terminology, which is, I think, really silly, limiting terminologies. And it just kind of makes common sense. If we want to talk about this on nuts and bolts science or physics level, densities relate to the dimensional level of consciousness. Physically, when we come to different realms, it has to do with how fast like electrons spin around atoms. The faster it goes, the more charged up it is by the consciousness, and then the higher the density it may be able to transfer into. A lot of more crazy stuff like that. But tell me what you thought of this. What do you think of the densities concept? If you want to get involved, you can check out afterlifetopics.com. You can join the Facebook group, buy some of my books like Understanding Life After Death, or support the channel, being able to help fund future projects by becoming a patron, which you can do at afterlifetopics.com/university. By doing that, you gain access to tons of really cool presentations on a private Facebook page that only members have access to. So that's something to think about if you want to help out a little bit. To be able to keep going with all this stuff, I need to still have some revenue coming in, or else it's back to working full time, teaching English or something, and then the amount of content, the videos, it's all gonna drop off. So I need enough money just to be able to keep myself going, to be able to keep this work up. So any help is appreciated. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next video.